I live alone. At least, that's what I thought. 3 months ago, I moved into a small 2-bedroom townhouse on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy, but it was quiet and affordable, which is rare these days. I work from home as a graphic designer, so most of my time is spent inside anyway. The place felt perfect for that kind of lifestyle. When I moved in, the landlord mentioned the previous tenant had installed a small smart home security system.
Door sensor.
Motion camera in the living room, basic stuff. He said I could keep using it if I wanted. At the time, it felt unnecessary. But one night during the first week, I heard someone walking past my front door at almost midnight, probably just a neighbor, but it made me uneasy enough to activate the cameras, just in case. For 2 months, nothing happened.
No alerts. No weird notifications.
Just silence. Then last Tuesday happened. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Still half asleep, I grabbed it and looked at the screen. A notification from the security app. Motion detected in living room. What caught my attention wasn't the motion. It was the time. A little after 3 in the morning. I stared at the notification for a few seconds, trying to wake my brain up. Motion detection sometimes triggers randomly. Shadows, lights from outside, bugs flying near the camera. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the app. There was a recorded clip attached to the alert. 10 seconds long. I pressed play. First, it looked normal. My living room was dark except for the streetlight shining through the window. Couch, coffee table, TV, everything exactly where it should be. Then the camera adjusted its exposure slightly, and I noticed something. The hallway door. It was open. That didn't make sense. I always closed that door before going to bed. Always. The video kept playing. 5 seconds in, something moved. Not clearly, just a shadow shifting near the edge of the frame. My heart started beating faster. I replayed the clip. This time, I watched the hallway more carefully. Right at the end of the video, a shape appeared. Person. Just the side of their shoulder and head stepping slightly into view before the clip ended. I felt the sleep drain out of my body instantly, because there was only one problem with that. I live alone. I sat up in bed, staring at my bedroom door. The house was completely silent.
No footsteps. No sounds.
Nothing. Part of me wanted to believe the footage was old, or glitched, but the timestamp said it had happened less than 2 minutes ago, which meant if someone had been in my living room, they were still in the house. My stomach twisted. I slowly got out of bed and grabbed the only thing nearby that could remotely be used as a weapon. A heavy metal flashlight. Not exactly comforting, but it was something. I opened the security app again and switched to the live camera feed. The living room appeared on my phone screen. Dark. Empty. The hallway door was still open though. I stared at the screen, trying to catch any movement. Nothing. After about 30 seconds, I forced myself to move. Step by step, I walked toward my bedroom door. Every small creak in the floor sounded 10 times louder in the silence. I opened the door slowly. The hallway light was off. The living room at the end looked exactly like the camera feed. Still, empty. But that open hallway door bothered me, because that door led to the small storage room under the stairs. I never used it, mostly because it smelled old and dusty, and because the previous tenant had left a bunch of random junk inside. Old boxes, broken furniture, things I never bothered to throw away. I stood there listening. Still nothing. My phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. This time my heart nearly stopped, because the notification said, motion detected, storage room camera. I froze. Storage room camera? I didn't remember installing a camera there. Confused, I opened the app again. Sure enough, a second camera feed appeared that I had never noticed before. Maybe the previous tenant installed it. Maybe I just overlooked it. Either way, the clip was already available. My hands felt cold as I pressed play. The video showed the inside of the storage room. Dim lighting, boxes stacked against the wall, old shelves, and right in the center of the frame, someone sitting on the floor. My brain refused to process it at first, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. A man, thin, dirty clothes, messy hair, just sitting there quietly, looking straight at the camera, looking straight at me. My entire body went numb, because that meant one thing. He wasn't sneaking into the house. He was living in it. The clip ended after 10 seconds. I stared at my phone, unable to breathe properly. Then the app refreshed again. The live feed opened automatically. The storage room camera showed the same man, still sitting there. But now, he was smiling and slowly raising his hand, as if he knew I was watching. That was the moment survival instinct finally kicked in. I didn't investigate. I didn't confront him. I grabbed my keys, ran out the front door, and called the police from my car. Took them 10 minutes to arrive. The longest 10 minutes of my life. When they searched the house, they found him exactly where the camera showed. Inside the storage room, living there, for who knows how long. The officers later told me something that made the whole situation even worse. Apparently, it's called frogging, when someone secretly lives inside another person's home without them knowing, using their food, watching them, waiting until they leave or sleep before moving around. The man had been hiding there for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. There were empty food wrappers, water bottles, even a blanket tucked behind the boxes, which means while I was sleeping, working, watching TV, he was just a few feet away behind that door, listening, watching, waiting. I moved out 2 days later. I don't live there anymore, but sometimes late at night, I still think about that moment when the camera clip ended. Because when he smiled and waved at the camera, it didn't look like someone who had just been discovered. It looked like someone who had been waiting for me to notice him. And sometimes I wonder something that I probably shouldn't. What if the camera alert wasn't an accident? What if he wanted me to see him? The police told me everything was handled. They arrested the guy that night. Trespassing, breaking and entering. A few other charges I honestly didn't listen to very carefully because my brain was still trying to process the idea that someone had been secretly living inside my house. But the next morning, something about the whole situation started bothering me. Not the fear, not the anger, the timeline. According to the officers, the man had been hiding in the storage room for about 3 weeks. They found food wrappers, water bottles, even a small pile of clothes stuffed behind the boxes. 3 weeks, which meant for 21 days, I had been walking around the house completely unaware that another person was only a few feet away, using my bathroom, eating my food, watching me. That thought alone made my skin crawl, but something didn't make sense. When I activated the security system 2 months earlier, I had checked every camera feed. There had only been one camera listed, the living room camera. The storage room camera that caught him hadn't been there, at least not on the app. So where did it come from? Later that afternoon, I opened the security app again while sitting in my temporary Airbnb. The storage room camera was still listed. Same feed, same angle, same timestamp from the night before, which meant it had definitely been connected to the system. But I had never added it. And I knew for a fact the landlord hadn't either because he barely knew how to use a smartphone. That left only one other possibility, the previous tenant. The more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. Why would someone install a hidden camera in a storage room? And why wouldn't the landlord know about it? Curiosity eventually got the better of me. Called him. "Hey," I said casually. Random question. "Do you remember anything about an extra camera under the stairs?" He sounded confused. Extra camera? In the storage room. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No," he said finally. "The only one I remember is the living room camera." That answer made my stomach tighten, because it confirmed something important. The storage room camera had been hidden, which meant whoever installed it didn't want anyone else to know it was there. And suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about the man sitting on the floor in that footage, looking directly into the camera, smiling, like he knew it was there. That thought stuck in my head for the rest of the day. By evening, curiosity had turned into something stronger. I needed to see the house again, just once. The police had already finished their investigation and cleared the property. Technically, there was nothing stopping me from going back. So So around sunset, I drove there. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. Quiet, normal, almost peaceful, which made the whole situation feel even more surreal. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside slowly. The house smelled faintly like cleaning chemicals, probably from the officers dusting for fingerprints. Everything else looked untouched. The couch, the coffee table, the hallway leading to the storage room. My eyes kept drifting toward that door, the same door that had been open in the camera footage. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring at it. Then I forced myself to walk over. The door creaked slightly when I opened it. The storage room looked smaller than I remembered. Boxes stacked along the wall, old furniture pieces, dust everywhere. But the thing that caught my attention immediately was the camera. It was mounted high in the corner near the ceiling. Small, black, barely noticeable unless you were specifically looking for it, which explained why I never saw it before. I stepped inside the room and looked closer. The camera was wired directly into the wall, not connected to the normal smart home system, which meant someone had installed it permanently and professionally. The longer I stared at it, the more uncomfortable I felt, because whoever placed that camera wanted a clear view of the entire room, including the exact spot where the man had been sitting, almost like they expected someone to be there. My chest tightened. That didn't feel random anymore. I stepped back into the hallway and closed the door again. That's when I noticed something else, something I somehow missed before. A thin scratch marked near the bottom of the door frame. At first I thought it was just damage from moving furniture, but when I crouched down to look closer, I realized it was a groove, a repeated scratch pattern, like the door had been locked from the outside many times. Slowly, my stomach started sinking, because that door didn't have a lock, at least not one visible from the hallway, which meant if someone had been locking it, the mechanism had to be inside. I opened the door again. This time I inspected the inside frame carefully, and after a few seconds I found it. A small metal latch hidden behind the edge of the door. Simple, but effective. It allowed someone to lock the storage room door from the outside without it being obvious, which raised a question that made my chest feel heavy. Why would anyone need to lock someone inside that room? The police had assumed the man broke in and hid there, but the more I looked around, the less that explanation made sense. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damiglax, nothing, and the man in the footage didn't look scared or desperate. He looked comfortable, like someone who had been sitting there many times before. Then another thought hit me, one I hadn't considered until that moment. If the previous tenant installed the camera, maybe they also installed the lock, which meant the storage room might not have been a hiding place. It might have been a cage. A cold chill ran down my spine, because suddenly the timeline felt wrong. The man had been there for 3 weeks, but what if he had been there longer? What if the reason he didn't try to escape was because he couldn't? I stepped out of the room again, feeling a strange sense of dread building in my chest. The house felt different now, not like a home, more like a place with secrets buried in the walls. And as I stood there thinking about the hidden camera, the hidden latch, and the strange man sitting calmly on the floor, a realization slowly crept into my mind. Maybe the man hadn't been secretly living in my house. Maybe he had been left there. And the worst part, whoever left him might not have expected him to survive long enough for someone else to find him. The thought refused to leave my head. Maybe the man in the storage room hadn't been hiding. Maybe he had been left there. I stood in the hallway for a long time staring at that door, replaying everything the police told me. They had assumed he broke in. That was the simplest explanation. But the more I thought about the hidden latch, the hidden camera, the lack of forced entry, the more it felt wrong. If someone secretly moved into a house, they would try to stay invisible. But that man in the footage didn't behave like someone hiding. He sat directly in front of the camera, looked at it, smiled, then waved, almost like he knew someone would eventually see him. That didn't feel like fear. That felt like a signal. My heart started beating faster, because suddenly a disturbing possibility crossed my mind. What if the camera wasn't meant to catch him? What if it was meant to prove he was still alive? I turned and looked back at the storage room door again. The small metal latch was still hanging on the frame. Quiet, ordinary, but now it looked different, like a piece of evidence. I stepped inside the room again, this time looking more carefully. The shelves were filled with junk from the previous tenant. Old boxes, broken electronics, dust-covered tools. But something near the floor caught my attention. A small metal bowl. I hadn't noticed it earlier. It was tucked behind a stack of boxes against the wall. When I moved the boxes aside, the bowl became clearly visible. There was dried food residue inside. My stomach twisted, because the bowl looked exactly like something you'd leave out for an animal. And right next to it was another one, an empty water dish. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine, because that meant something horrifying. Someone had been feeding him, regularly, which meant whoever put him in that room didn't expect him to leave. They expected him to stay there. I suddenly remembered something the police officer said when they arrested the man. They described him as malnourished but stable. At the time, I assumed that meant he had been sneaking food from my kitchen. But now that theory made less sense. If he had free access to the house, why stay locked inside the storage room? Why sleep on the floor? Why sit there calmly waiting? The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in around me. My brain started connecting things I hadn't noticed before. The hidden camera, the latch, the bowls. None of those things made sense for a random intruder, but they made perfect sense for something else. A prisoner. I stepped out of the room quickly, feeling my chest tighten. The police had already taken the man away, but they never asked deeper questions. They assumed he broke in. Case closed. But now I wasn't so sure. I pulled out my phone and searched for the previous tenant's name. The landlord had mentioned it casually when I signed the lease. After a few minutes of digging through public records and social media, I finally found him. His name was Daniel Carter, late 30s, worked as a freelance contractor. The profile picture showed a tall guy with a beard standing in front of the same townhouse I had been living in. But the thing that caught my attention wasn't the picture. It was the comments under his last post. Friends asking where he went. People saying they hadn't heard from him in months. One comment stood out. It was from someone claiming to be his sister. Daniel, please answer your phone. Mom is worried. The date of the comment was almost 5 months ago, which meant something strange. If Daniel disappeared months earlier, who had been paying the rent until I moved in? And more importantly, who had been feeding the man in the storage room? My heart started pounding again, because suddenly another terrifying thought appeared. What if the man the police arrested was Daniel? I scrolled back to the footage on my phone. The image quality wasn't perfect, but I zoomed in on his face. Messy hair, thin beard, tired eyes. Then I looked back at the profile photo online. Same facial structure, same shape of nose, same scar above the eyebrow. My stomach dropped. The man in my storage room wasn't a random intruder. He was the previous tenant, the same man who used to live in that house, which meant one thing. He didn't break in. He was already there. Someone had locked him inside his own home. My hands started shaking, because that meant the real question wasn't how he got there. The real question was, who put him there? And why were they feeding him like a captive animal? I suddenly realized something else. The landlord never mentioned Daniel moving out. He just said the previous tenant left. But if Daniel had been trapped in that storage room the entire time, then the person who showed the house to me might not have known the truth. Or worse, they might have known exactly what happened. The house suddenly felt wrong. Not just creepy, dangerous, because whoever locked Daniel in that room might think the secret was still hidden. They might not know he had been discovered. I quickly locked the front door and walked toward my car. But before I reached it, something made me stop. The car was parked at the end of the street, engine running, headlights off, just sitting there quietly, watching the house. For a moment, I told myself it was nothing, just a neighbor. But then the driver's side door opened, and someone stepped out. The figure stood under the streetlight for a second, just long enough for me to notice one thing. They were staring directly at the house, directly at me. Then they slowly got back into the car and drove away. My heart was racing now, because suddenly the situation felt much bigger than a random break-in. The man in the storage room wasn't hiding. He was surviving, and whoever locked him there might have just realized their secret had been exposed. I drove away from that house for the last time that night. I haven't gone back since. The police still believe they caught a homeless man trespassing. They never connected him to the previous tenant. They never asked why a hidden camera was installed in the storage room. And they definitely never asked who had been feeding him. But sometimes late at night, I think about the moment he smiled at the camera and waved. Because now I understand something I didn't realize before. He wasn't waving at me. He was waving at whoever had been watching him through that camera. And maybe, just maybe, they were still watching. If you enjoy dark Reddit-style stories like this one, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because some secrets are much worse than cheating.